Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today we have yet another commentated octagon match between Parker Ince of the now long-dormant Actions at One podcast, playing against Sam Mann of the Octagon Online Warhammer 40k Competitive WA League. We've got Parker assuming the Warlord Old One-Eye of the Tyranid faction with his chosen Synapse unit, the Stalking Lictor, and Sam is playing his Ku'gath's Dirty Baker's Dozen deck. So it's a slightly modified version, whereas it might be more fitting, I believe, to call it the Dozen and Three Nurglings, something to that effect. He's added a few different units, I believe he's stripped out a few different events, but he's still playing something like 15 army units in total, so it's very, very event-heavy. We see the initiative token in Parker's hand, and in taking a look at our planet layout, we have Farron as planet number 1, which routes non-warlords. We have Planum as number 2, which moves non-warlords. We have Yavvarn, planet 3, which puts units into play. We have Ossus number 4, which steals resources, and Taurus number 5, which rewards a player that wins a battle there that happens to have a lower unit count than their opponent. For Parker's first action, we see the zero-cost limited Ripper Swarm deployed to planet number 5, which is going to be winning command, and seeing as how Sam's unit count is likely to almost always be far, far lower than our Tyranid player, it's going to be of the paramount importance that the Tyranid try to protect Taurus at any and all costs. Sam plays out a copy of Khorne Berserker to planet number 1, which is one of scarcely few army units in his deck. It's 2 attack, it's got Brutal. We see our Tyranid player try to lock down his economic lead early by playing out a Toxic Venomthrope to planet number 2 and planet number 5, so as soon as the command struggle happens to be won at either or both of those planets, he's given the opportunity of infesting them, and as soon as they are infested, once he happens to win subsequent command struggles, he can earn either an additional resource token or draw an additional card, entirely up to him. We've seen Sam pass during deployment, and Parker now passes indeed. I can't really imagine that Old One-Eye is going to want to battle this Khorne Berserker, seeing as how many events and shields are likely to be in Sam's hand. Sam ends up going to planet number 5 to try to win here at Taurus, which definitely makes sense. Old One-Eye goes to planet number 2, so he'll be able to move a non-warlord unit of his choice if he wins a battle there, and we see Parker's Synapse unit go to planet number 4. It's not actually going to be fighting a battle there, but it will draw some additional income for him. Sam ends up pulling in 1 card and 3 resources, whereas identically, albeit on many more planets, Prince Parker ends up drawing 1 card and 3 resources as well. Parker Ince, his username on Octagon happens to be Prince, so pardon me if I get a little confused there. Farron, a battle is taking place here. We see that Khorne Berserker going unopposed. If it wins that battle, it's going to be able to pick and choose a non-warlord unit to route. Looks like it picks the Toxic Venomthrope at planet number 2. So planet number 2 does presently happen to be infested, but unless that Toxic Venomthrope happens to be there again the following round, he's not going to be able to generate any additional cards or resources there, but certainly it's now a fantastic target for something like a Shrieking Harpy or some gargoyles to swoop in opportunistically. It all kind of remains to be seen. Old One-Eye is going to win a battle here at Planum. He chooses to activate its battle ability to relocate a Toxic Venomthrope from planet number 5 to planet number 4 so that it's safe from Ku'gath. The battle at Taurus now takes place, and Ku'gath has the opportunity to attack that Ripper Swarm. He does manage to kill it, even though he did not happen to have any damage upon himself to use with his reaction that is actually moving damage, which under normal circumstances never allows the opportunity for an opponent to shield away that damage or do anything tricky with assigning that damage, as we might see with Old One-Eye and his signature army unit, the Lurking Hormigaunt. Sam is going to choose resources instead of cards, so we're about to go into our headquarters phase, but we're going to see Parker with a total of 9 resources and 6 cards, whereas Sam is going to have an incredible 14 resources and 9 cards. The initiative token now passes to Ku'gath, and our new 5th planet is going to be Barleth. Taurus. So, at the present moment, Sam happens to be sitting on one red material icon, and the earliest that any player could win the game is going to be our new third planet, Ossus 4. So they could win through strong point icons if they happen to win Planum, Yvarn, and of course Ossus 4. We see Sam play out one of his curious choices in this deck, the Prometheum Mine. It's a limited card. It happens to generate you an additional resource each deploy phase after the deploy phase that it's played. It only costs one, it costs one card, but over the course of a very long game, it may ultimately prove to derive or provide some sort of economic benefit to you. Parker plays out another zero-cost Ripper Swarm, once again at planet number 5, and we see Sam put out a Gleeful Plague Beast to planet number 1. So this is an infested planet. We could certainly see a Predation played by our Tyranid player to try to preserve this infestation token to move it further along the line. What's particularly nasty about deploying some formidable elite unit at Planum is that should Sam happen to win a battle there, he'll be able to move the target non-warlord of his choice to a planet of his choice, so that he can ensure it's going to be ready to attack during the following combat round when he loses that initiative token, presuming he shifts it one planet over to Yvarn, which will then be the new first planet. We see our Tyranid player play out a copy of the Scything Hormigons, which happen to automatically infest whatever planet they happen to be deployed to, and yet another brutal unit. We see one of the new unit additions that Sam has made to his Dirty Baker's Dozen deck. We see a copy of Rograk's Bloodhand, all but guaranteeing he's going to be able to lock down this first planet, seeing as how that unit is a 2/5 with Brutal and Bloodthirst. So as soon as a unit happens to be destroyed at its planet, during that one individual combat round, and only that combat round, his attack power is doubled. So he's going to be taking damage from that Gleeful Plague Beast. He's going to be dealing, a lot of damage himself. As soon as the unit dies, whether it's Sam's, whether it's the enemy's, he's going to be dealing out a ton of damage indeed. Looks like both of our players pass after we see a Volatile Pyrovore played out by our Tyranid player. It attacks for 3. As soon as it's destroyed, it attacks again for 3, so that's a ton of damage. In regard to where we're sending these units, I presume Sam is going to be sending to planet number 2 just to set himself up for the following round, though I could also see him setting up at planet number 3 just because I suppose he's going to go to planet number 4, so maybe he's playing a very long game indeed, or he just wants to be absolutely sure that he can win Taurus. I kind of forgot that that planet existed, frankly. We see Old One-Eye go to planet number 2, which makes sense. This Toxic Venomthrope will be able to generate an additional resource or an additional card. Old One-Eye could have potentially, contested Taurus or something like that, but in any case, we're going to end up seeing Sam pull in 2 cards and 2 resources, which definitely is not bad for his deck, and seeing as how his unit count does happen to be so low, I'm frankly pretty surprised as to just how many units he has on the table here, although it's certainly nothing compared to our Tyranid player. It looks like Parker ends up generating an additional resource token thanks to his Toxic Venomthrope, and then through conventional command phase means he ends up accumulating 2 cards and 2 resources. The battle at Planum is going to be taking place. The Gleeful Plague Beast procs to deal out 1 damage to each of these units, and now it's going to be Sam's opportunity to attack. Rograk's Bloodhand is going to be attacking for 3. The Gleeful Plague Beast is going to be attacking for 3. Sam still has 8 cards in hand and 6 resources. He's got all kinds of nasty events in his deck, like Warp Storm, Nurgling Bomb, Archon's Terror, Cacophonic Choir, all kinds of nasty things. We see the Gleeful Plague Beast swing for 3 at the Volatile Pyrovore, and it is outright destroyed, and we see Sam assign all 3 points of damage to the Gleeful Plague Beast. He's not bothered to mitigate any of that incoming damage whatsoever. And of course, during any subsequent combat phase, the Gleeful Plague Beast is going to risk killing itself with its ability. The interesting thing about that forced reaction is that it's entirely up to the player holding the initiative token to determine how multiple forced reactions actually trigger. So if at any point there happens to be 2 copies of Gleeful Plague Beast or 2 copies of Ku'gath's Nurglings that happen to be activating, the player holding the initiative token can determine the order in which units are affected by that forced reaction, just so they can try to maximize the amount of damage that the opposing army takes and minimize the amount of damage that they themselves ultimately incur. But we also see a battle at the second planet. Sam took the opportunity via Planum to relocate Rograk's Bloodhand so that he can incur a little bit of damage, potentially deal out an enormous amount of damage himself, and seeing as how Sam has a hand that is almost undoubtedly full of events, for instance, we see a Tzeentch's Firestorm right here, that's going to set up Rograk's Bloodhand to potentially outright bloody the enemy warlord in a single swing. We see this Tzeentch's Firestorm paid for 4 resources. It's an enormous cost to be sure, but it does mean that that unit is destroyed, and Rograk's Bloodhand is going to be attacking for 5, double to 10, so he's going to be swinging for a grand total of 10 attack, which is absolutely insane. I can only imagine that Old One-Eye is going to be outright obliterated by this effect. There's going to be absolutely nothing that he can do to circumvent this attack. I mean, even if he were to discard his Greater Scything Talons or Great Scything Talons as a means of a 3 shield icon way to try and block that. I apparently don't have the image installed for a bloodied Old One-Eye, but yeah, there's nothing that Old One-Eye could do to circumvent that effect. And now a new round of combat does not start because, quite wisely, we see Old One-Eye retreat, vacating the premises here. So Yvarn is going to be won by Sam, so absolutely fantastic play on his part. We do not see Yvarn trigger, and things are looking very, very bad indeed for our Tyranid player. Fast forwarding to planet number 4, of course, we see Ku'gath take a swing of 1 point of damage against that Stalking Lictor. The Stalking Lictor swings, hits that Khorne Berserker. And then at the end of the combat round, once again, quite wisely, the Stalking Lictor leaves play. At the present moment, we see 1, 2, 3, 4 units in total for our Chaos player, whereas we see 5 units controlled by our Tyranid player, and that one small difference allows Sam to pull in an additional 3 resources, which is going to help fund additional absurdly expensive Tzeentch's Firestorm events. Aatrox Prime is going to be our new 5th planet. The headquarters phase comes and goes. Parker acquires the initiative token. He also happens to be sitting on 11 resources, 8 cards, relative to Sam's 10 resources, 9 cards. We've currently got a little bit of, I would, under normal circumstances, say an economic lead for the Tyranid player, but we see Sam winning just as much command as our Tyranid, the only difference being that Toxic Venomthrope is also sitting at an infested planet. So it's going to be, it is going to be generating an additional resource or card for him. Sam points out that the infestation token was removed from Yvarn because Sam happened to win a battle there as a non-Tyranid player during the previous round, and we happen to see our Tyranid play out a copy of Lurking Hormigaunt. So now it's going to be up to Sam to take his deploy action. He certainly has a glut of resources left. He's got one of his unique units out on the table, which is 1 fewer unit in his deck that he can actually play. We see a copy of Slaanesh's Temptation played out on the new 5th planet, which means that any Tyranid that happens to be deployed at a well, I suppose it is the 5th planet, not 4th. Anyways, Slaanesh's Temptation sitting there on the table, increasing the cost of each Tyranid unit played at any planet other than Aatrox Prime by 1. And as soon as the battle ends at that planet, that attachment is sacrificed. So a very nasty effect. Very, very, very nasty planet against Tyranids, particularly the Swarm Lord. A battle is unlikely to be taking place there unless Sam happens to send Old One-Eye there. He'd be dropping off a copy of Toxic Venomthrope, but seeing as how the victory condition for Sam is, not our current 1st planet, but next round's 1st planet, I can't imagine that we're going to be seeing Tyranids go too far down the line, although it's a big problem now that Old One-Eye is bloodied. We see Sam use one of his deploy actions to trigger a cacophonic choir. Our Tyranid player currently controls a total of 6 units, which means that Old One-Eye is exhausted. He's not going to be doing anything to win command, but our Tyranid player with 7 cards in hand now has to deal with assigning 6 points of indirect damage among their units. It looks like Parker is going to be assigning 2 points of damage to his will be committed alongside the Warlord and show up exhausted toxic venomthrope, and he's also deciding what else to be rid of. So he has 4 points of damage remaining. 3 of it ends up going on Old One-Eye, and that is putting him at a very dangerous position indeed. And then that final point of damage ends up on the Stalking Lictor. We see a great Scything Talons, the signature attachment for Old One-Eye, discarded to end up preventing 3 of that damage assigned to Old One-Eye. So it looks like that wasn't quite as dangerous as I thought it was. But as soon as Old One-Eye ends up taking 6 points of damage, this game is absolutely over. Rograk's Bloodhand, once again sitting at the first planet, is going to be swinging for 5, and as soon as the unit dies, note that the initiative token is not held by Sam. Then Rograk's Bloodhand will once again be swinging for 10, and seeing as how Sam has 7 cards in hand, it's quite likely that it's absolutely full of events and attachments to be discarded as shields to keep Rograx alive as long as possible. And the Tyranid player, outside of effects like No Mercy, doesn't happen to have any in-faction means of doing unpreventable damage. There's no Tyranid Crushing Blow, there's none of that. There's no Tyranid direct source of damage apart from something along the lines of a Volatile Pyrovore, so it's a very interesting game at this point, and I'm curious to see if there's anything Old One-Eye can do to try to salvage this. Sam ends up putting a copy of Doombolt into play. It looks like there was a slight misplay here. This Doombolt is not actually able to target that Stalking Lictor. So just to make sure that we correct for that mistake, Prince, instead of using that Ferocious Strength as shields, all of a sudden, he recurs that, of course. So a little bit of a misplay on Sam's part, no big deal. Tyranids are still new. Parker points out that Tzeentch's Firestorm does not specify army units only, so that is a good example of a card that can absolutely obliterate Synapse creatures. But with that said, it seems as though Sam has finally passed, and I do believe that both of our players have passed at this point. In regard to deployment, it would certainly make sense if Sam sends Ku'gath and his Plague Beast to planet number 2, just because that global point of damage would be fantastic in potentially clearing out this Hormigaunt, as would Ku'gath. As soon as he takes a point of damage from the Plague Beast, he'll be able to move that damage to the Lurking Hormigaunt, and it will die because he won't have any opportunity to shield. I can only imagine that Old One-Eye is going to want to avoid planet number 1 and likely planet number 2 like the Plague, which means that we will more than likely see an Aatrox Prime committance for him, and for that reason I suppose we could have seen Sam go there just to be a bit of a bastard. Sam is ultimately going to go to planet number 3, which is a little bit curious. So I'm curious about what Sam's thoughts there were. We do happen to see Old One-Eye go to planet number 5, and the Stalking Lictor shows up at planet number 3. So because Ku'gath is exhausted, he's not going to win command at that location by default, and that's going to be a sweeping command phase victory for our Tyranid player, which he's definitely going to need as many resources and cards as possible to try and, claw his way out of this pit that Sam has trapped him in, and Sam is only going to be winning command at Yavvarn. We see a grand total of 4 cards and 4 resources acquired by our Tyranid player, putting Prince at 13 resources and 10 cards. Sam is sitting at a still respectable, still frightening 6 cards and 7 resources, considering he's got effects like Warp Storm, Nurgling Bomb, Archon's Terror, Tzeentch's Firestorm. That is a hell of a lot of nasty stuff that we could ultimately see. It seems as though at the beginning of the combat phase at Taurus, we see each unit present take 1 point of damage, the Gleeful Plague Beast itself is killed, and Sam happens to play the not often seen card Fall Back, so as soon as an elite unit is destroyed, it's put into play from the discard pile to the HQ. So I think this is a really good example of where multiple copies of that Gleeful Plague Beast in play at the same planet could have been very interesting, because since Parker has the initiative token, he'd have been able to kind of determine the order in which those forced reactions occur somewhat simultaneously. He could have minimized the damage going out to his Stalking Lictor, he could have maximized the damage going out to Ku'gath and that Khorne Berserker, or if he didn't want the Warlord to be able to move damage, or if he didn't want to really fuel that brutal keyword, or if he wanted to put a ton of pressure onto Sam to shield, then he could have maximized the damage dealt out by those forced reactions occurring both at the same time. But we do see that Khorne Berserker take a swing for 4 against the Stalking Lictor, which does outright manage to kill it, and then that battle is going to be completed. We see Sam with a grand total of 4 units. Our Tyranid player also happens to have 4 units, so we're not going to see Taurus end up being triggered. And of course, seeing as how Aatrox Prime, when uncontested, that copy of Slaaneish's Temptation is gone, and we see it fire into Sam's HQ to deal out 1 point of damage to each of his units. We see Sam discard that earlier unplayed copy of Doombolt to prevent one of the points of damage that would have been otherwise assigned to Rograk's Bloodhand. So, at the present moment, it seems as though our headquarters phase has now started, and we're taking a look at just an immense number of resources here. It seems as though Parker happens to be sitting on 17 resources, 12 cards. Sam has 10 resources and 7 cards. The initiative is in Sam's hands. Sam currently, if he wins this new first planet, then the game is going to come down to him. He's got 2 red, 2 green, 2 blue icons, and there's a green icon up for grabs here. Our Tyranid player has no planet icons whatsoever, and things are looking extraordinarily nasty for our Tyranid. Certainly he has a wealth of resources in his hand. He has just a monumental number of cards, but I'm quite curious to see, is he going to have enough? We see a copy of Ku'gath's Nurglings put at planet number 3, which is a little bit curious. It's going to allow Sam to at least match command against this Ripper Swarm. Any unit that moves to planet number 3 is going to be taking a point of damage, not deployed. Oh my god. So a digestion pool for our Tyranid player, and then quite horrifyingly, we see an Inquisitor Caius Roth, played by Sam, and as soon as this unique unit enters play, each player has to choose and discard down to 4 cards if possible. And seeing as how Parker currently has 11 cards in his hand, discarding a grand total of 7 is going to be absolutely incredibly debilitating. I believe Sam didn't have to discard... No, Sam had to discard either 1 card or 0 cards, and we see a lot discarded by Parker. Hunter Gargoyles, No Mercy, Ferocious Strength, Virulent Spore Sacs, and another copy of Virulent Spore Sacs. So he's only got 5 cards at the present moment. He must be facing a really difficult decision for what left to get rid of. We see a Predation gone. Maybe our Tyranid player has something like a Shrieking Harpy to try and save him, but at this point... oh man, things are looking really bad. We've got a Tyranid warrior that's played out to the very first planet, and it's attacking for 2. It's got 4 hit points. We see Sam pass, and now it's going to be all up to Parker. He'd better hope to high hell that he pulls something good, and he has to pass. So both players have now passed. It's going to be up to them to figure out where they're going to send their warlords. Sam has to be sending his warlord to planet number 1, and I can't imagine that old One-Eye is going to be going to planet number 1. That would be a huge liability. So maybe he's going to go to planet number 3, maybe he's going to go to planet number 4. The Stalking Lictor is now, of course, dead. So let's see, where does old One-Eye go? He's going to want to try and avoid being destroyed. So I can only assume it's going to be Aatrox Prime, our planet number 4. Curiously, Sam ends up sending all of his units to planet number 2. I don't know if Sam just has some sort of like nasty event or what exactly, but he's going to forego the victory, immediately, and I guess he's playing a little bit safer, a little bit more securely, just to try and absolutely prevent Parker from coming back, perhaps, but it seems a little bit of a curious choice, in my opinion. Sam ends up pulling in 1 card, 1 resource. We see old One-Eye go to planet number 3. There's no Synapse unit there, so old One-Eye takes a point of damage from that Ku'gath's Nurglings, and Parker ends up pulling in 2 cards and 2 resources. And now I'm just curious to see how everything is going to go. Sam's got a tremendous number of combat units sitting here at Taurus. I guess he wanted to try and block that at any and all costs, but I'm very curious to see how things turn out. Sam does happen to have a higher unit total than our Tyranid player. Maybe Sam was... No, I guess Sam didn't have a Warp Storm. I suppose he could still try to use that now on the enemy, but the first planet is going to be won by our Tyranid player, and that's going to allow him to steal a resource from Sam. We now see Parker at a grand total of 18 resources. Taurus is going to be won by our Chaos player, entirely uncontested, and now a planet's going to be taking... battle is going to be taking place at Barlas. So we see the Ripper Swarm take a swing at the Ku'gath's Nurglings. It takes a point of damage. The Ku'gath's Nurglings takes a swing at old One-Eye. He's already got 1 point of damage. What are we going to see discarded? We see a Dark Cunning discarded by our Tyranid player, which means old One-Eye is only going to take 1 point of damage. And then what exactly do we see from Sam? We see nothing, so old One-Eye, swinging for 1, ends up killing that Ku'gath's Nurglings, and that means that Parker's going to win that planet. Sam randomly discards a card, which ends up happening to be a Gleeful Plague Beast, and now it's the end of the combat phase. We're going to move on to headquarters, and that means Parker has an incredible 22 resources and 7 cards, so he could play out up to 3 copies of Shrieking Harpy should he choose to do so, and it now happens to be his initiative. So if we see something like a Shrieking Harpy plus a Scything Hormigaunt to infest Taurus, that could be very, very bad for Sam indeed. We would not see the exhaustion of any kind of elite army units, so that would leave the Gleeful Plague Beast open, but that's still so incredibly nasty. We see a copy of the Virulent Spore Sacs played out by the initiative token possessing Parker, played to planet number 2. Sam happens to have 9 resources and 6 cards in hand, and I'm curious to see what exactly he's going to be playing. He puts out a copy of Ku'gath's Nurglings, which is after units move to that planet, they take damage. That is quite a few different units from Parker's HQ. We see a Spore Burst, which is going to put into play a unit with printed cost 3 or lower to an infested planet. Oh, it looks as though that was a small mistake on part of Parker. He attempted to recur that Volatile Pyrovore to play, but of course our current first planet is not infested. We've not seen a Scything Hormigaunt to infest it automatically. There's no Tyranid support to infest it automatically during the headquarters phase. This Virulent Spore Sacs can only infest planets during combat. So at the present moment, we're still waiting on a move from our Tyranid. We see a Tyranid warrior sitting out at the first planet, but he seems very, very lonely there. Parker still has 17 resources compared to Sam's 7. But things are looking extraordinarily nasty for our Tyranid player. We see a second copy of the Ku'gath's Nurglings, which is going to be 2 points of damage to each and every one of these units from the HQ moving to that planet. At this point, there's barely any point to bringing them there whatsoever, just because Sam's going to get an opportunity to take a swing at Old One-Eye before Old One-Eye has a chance to retreat, or I'm sorry, he doesn't have the initiative token, so Old One-Eye's first action will be retreating. We do ultimately see a few different units played out to the first planet once Sam has passed. Parker puts out a Toxic Venomthrope, which will infest that planet should he win command there. And we also see a Ripper Swarm, and we also see a Shrieking Harpy, which is going to exhaust each enemy non-elite army and token unit present at that planet if it ends up being infested. We don't see an action from Sam to destroy this Toxic Venomthrope. Both players are going to choose the first planets, and let's see who's going to ultimately win command. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 command icons controlled by Sam, and we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 controlled by our Tyranid player. So it seems as though the Tyranid player is indeed going to win command at that planet, which is going to result in it being infested, and that's going to allow this Shrieking Harpy to activate, unless, I suppose, Sam didn't play any sort of action prior to the onset of the command phase. This planet is now infested, and that Shrieking Harpy is just looking absolutely wretched. We see our Tyranid player is going to win command at the first and second planet, so that's going to be 3 cards and 1 resource for him. And as we move into the combat phase, things are about to get very, very interesting indeed. And I'm wondering if things are going to start to go very, very bad for Sam. We see 10 resources, 4 cards for Parker, 5 resources, 4 cards for Sam. This copy of the Gleeful Plague Beast is going to deal out an immense amount of damage, and we see an Archon's Terror played by Sam, which allows this Shrieking Harpy to be routed, and that was the one and only chance that Parker happened to have. We immediately see him throw out the GG, and without that Shrieking Harpy to absolutely just annihilate that planet, that is game right there. We automatically see Sam drops the game, Parker concedes. That is just absolutely wretched. There would have been absolutely nothing that our Tyranid player could hope to do. I mean, this Khorne Berserker would be attacking for 5, Rograx Bloodhand would be attacking for 6, as soon as a unit dies, he'd be attacking for 12, this Gleeful Plague Beast would be dealing out damage to each and every unit present at that planet. That alone would kill off a bunch of Tyranids. Parker only had 4 cards left in hand, so this one card, this one Archon's Terror, completely dashed our Tyranid player's last-minute hopes and dreams. Had Parker been able to somehow manage to scrape a victory of this planet, it still would have all come down to him having to block Sam's victory at each and every additional planet, and without outright destroying Ku'gath, I don't know if there's absolutely anything he could have done. I mean, for all we know, Sam could have had a couple copies of Fetid Haze in his hand to make this all the worse for our Tyranid players. So, as ever, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for checking out yet another splendid commentated game. Thank you to Parker of the now long dormant Actions at 1 podcast for his participation. Very well played game by both players. Sam's very unconventional Ku'gath's Dirty Baker's Dozen deck, albeit modified from my deck deconstruction video, has won the day, and Old One-Eye kind of floundered during this match, but thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. If you are already subscribed, as ever, you're encouraged to share this content. More people see these videos, more people might like Conquest, more players join our community, and more players tell Fantasy Flight Games, continue supporting this game. So, if you'd like a game of your own, commentated, recorded, be sure to get in touch with me, follow me on Twitter or Facebook, and of course, if you feel so inclined to kick me $1 or $2 on a monthly basis just to help curb some of my file hosting and operating expenses, I'd be honored and flattered and humbled were you to check out my Patreon. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.